Welcome to Assertiveness Skills for Women. I am Dr. Julie Hanks, and I'm so thrilled that you're here. We're going to be talking about some skills that you can use in your personal lives and in your business and everything in between. I am a therapist, the owner of Wasatch Family Therapy, an assistant professor of social work, and the author of The Burnout Cure and the Assertiveness Guide for Women. So we'll be talking about some of those skills from my second book today. What comes to mind when you hear the term assertive woman? I want you to type it in the chat. What first comes to mind? This is like a therapy kind of, free association. I want you to type it in the chat, the first thing that comes to your mind. Often it is a word that starts with a B. There are lots of myths about assertiveness. So aggressive, overbearing. So myths and misconceptions about assertiveness. Assertiveness is aggressive. It's not aggressive. Assertiveness means confrontational. Assertiveness isn't nice. Assertiveness pushes people away. Assertiveness will scare men away when women are assertive. And assertiveness is selfish. So those are some myths. Assertiveness is not any of those things. So the number one fear that women have that keeps them from speaking up, what do you think that is? It is fear of disconnection in relationships. So here is what assertiveness is. Assertiveness is a way of communicating that is clear, confident, and self-assured. It enables you to express your thoughts, feelings, needs, and wants without infringing on the rights of others. So that is what assertiveness is and what the goal is that we are searching for today. So what happens when we don't assert ourselves? Well, I've asked a lot of women this question, and answers vary from headaches, depression, poor relationships, other physical symptoms, tension. So when we don't assert ourselves, when we don't say what we think, feel, want, and need in a way that other people can hear it, we tend to keep things inside, and that produces poor health and mental health and can impact our relationships negatively. So I'm going to talk about 5 skills of assertiveness today. And they're not what you think. This is not kind of what to say in each situation. Because what I found is women who come to my therapy office, they want to be assertive and speak their mind, but they don't really know what they think, feel, want, and need. So we're starting way back to the beginning of your life, talking about self-reflection. So it's really important to understand the patterns that you bring to your relationships, and they're based on your early childhood experiences. And when you can self-reflect, then you get a sense of clarity about who you are and what your part is in the communication dynamics. So there are 3 different kinds of attachments, or 3 different types. There is secure, avoidant, and anxious. So the easiest way to think about this is in an anxious attachment. So the attachment is the way that you connect with other people and the way that you manage your emotions. Anxious attachment is like turning the volume up. So your anxiety goes up, you may talk a lot, you may really try to cling to people, you're afraid of people leaving you. On the other end of the continuum of the dial is avoidant, and you kind of pretend maybe not to care as much. People want to be closer to you than you want to be to them. You tend to not know how you feel. Emotions tend to be shut down. And secure is somewhere in the middle, where you can, you know what you think, feel, want, and need. You can be close to other people without an overwhelming fear that they'll leave. And you can be by yourself, but you don't have to be totally isolated from other people. So we all develop one of these 3 types of attachments, and they impact our communication and our ability to be assertive right now. Another concept I want to share with you is differentiation of self. So we are unique and we are connected. So differentiation of self is the way that we balance being an individual and having our own thoughts, feelings, wants, and needs, and then being in connection with other people. Different families have different levels of differentiation of self. So low differentiation families tend to have a lot of conformity. They value conformity. And in higher levels of differentiation, people can be more unique and self-expressed and don't have to, like, we all play tennis, or we're all musicians, or we're all therapists, or we're all business owners. People can kind of do their own thing without the anxiety of the family going up. So knowing your level of differentiation of self is an important part of self-reflection. So here is a family relationship template, and I go through this in a lot more depth in the book. But so those family relationship patterns, what are those? What is your family identity? So we are all, what? Attractive, or we're all smart. Emotional rules. We'll get into that in a little bit. Gender messages. So what does it mean to be a boy or girl? Attachment style, we talked about, secure, anxious, and avoidant. Differentiation level. So in this, 0 is low, 10 is high. That means you can be yourself and be in your family relationships. And then assertiveness approach. Are you hesitant? Are you confident? Or are you guarded? So exploring family emotional patterns. Which emotions were okay and which were not okay? Which emotions were given names and responded to? How often did family members express vulnerable emotions like loneliness? I feel scared. I feel sad. Did you experience any physical symptoms growing up that didn't have an obvious physical cause? That can be the impact of suppressing emotions, like we talked a little bit earlier. And what behaviors did you see your parents engage in when they were trying not to feel something? So did they drink? Did they overeat? Did they rage at people? Or were they healthy and were able to say, look, I'm feeling this? So knowing what patterns you have from your family is crucial. Gender messages. Women are, girls should never say, I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can read through them. Real women always. Here's a good one. Good mothers do blank. So maybe pause and go through this at a later time and fill this out. I'll also give you a link where you can get handouts to fill out some of these exercises. Okay, the second skill, after you understand what patterns you're bringing from your family of origin, the second skill is self-awareness. So we have self-reflection, that's reflecting on the past. And then self-awareness is what's going on right now. What am I thinking, feeling, wanting, and needing? And when you know that, then you can communicate with confidence. So a lot of women can't identify, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? What am I needing and wanting? And so that is something that is important to ask yourself every day. In our culture, in Western culture, we value thoughts more than feelings, and we're better at saying what we think than how we feel. Feelings are really important. They drive all behavior. And I think my philosophy, according to Dr. Julie Hanks, is that emotions are more important than thoughts. Emotions are energy in motion, emotion. So they propel us to do something, to take action, and it's energy moving through our bodies. Emotional awareness is really important. Emotions are information. They're not moral issues. They're not good or bad. So I grew up with the message that being angry was bad. And so I stuffed my anger, and that created some problems for me emotionally with depression and low moods, some eating problems. So all feelings are good. I mean, they're all information. They just are. It's what we do with them that becomes the moral issue. And it's important to distinguish emotions or feelings from behavior, right? How you act on those. Those are different. If I had $1 for every time a client came into my office and I said, "How are you?" and they said, "Fine," I would be a millionaire. Well, not quite a million, but why do we say we're fine when people say, "How are you?" I tell my clients, well, you're sitting in a therapist's office. You must not be fine. There must be something going on. But underneath that fine, a lot of times we feel fragile, anxious, alone, clueless, crushed, never good enough. And it's important to be able to articulate what's going on with us. Dr. Dan Siegel says, name it to tame it. So an emotional strategy is just naming the emotion brings down the intensity and makes it a little bit more manageable. So name it to tame it. There are 6 basic emotions based on research, and it's important to have those 6 emotions memorized and ready to identify. And so those are happy, mad, sad, scared, surprise, disgust. So memorize those. Those are the basic ones. And then emotions kind of branch out from there. So instead of mad, are you enraged? Are you furious? Instead of scared, are you feeling trepidation? So they branch out from there. And in the handouts that I'll give you at the end, or the link at the end, there's a feeling word list that goes through multiple feeling words based on these 6 emotions. So emotions are like an ocean. When you look at an ocean, where is the life of the ocean? You might see a seagull or a dolphin, jumping, but the life of the ocean is underneath, and that's the same with human beings. The emotions that we show aren't necessarily what's underneath. Underneath are generally the more vulnerable emotions. Several years ago, my youngest daughter had a room that was incredibly messy, and she kept everything, every little string, fuzz, every paper from preschool, and it was driving me crazy. It was driving me crazy. And one night I went in and laid by her and said, Macy, you really need to clean up your room. She's like, I know, Mom, but everything's special. And I said, you need to get rid of about half of the things in your room. And she said, I know. And I said, you have to do it tomorrow. And she's like, but I don't want to do it tomorrow. And we got into this cycle that parents and kids get into. And I ended up getting mad and saying, well, I'm done snuggling, and shutting the door. And I was really upset. I was saying, yes, you are doing it tomorrow. You're getting rid of half your things. And so I slammed the door, left, and I thought about the room and my response. And I thought, okay, what was that anger, that frustration really about for me? What was underneath the emotion ocean for me? As I thought about it, I realized that my anger underneath that was fear. That I was scared that I'm not a good mom and that I'm not teaching my daughter how to take care of things, because I have a hard time taking care of things. I can organize objects. I mean, I can organize thoughts and ideas, but objects are hard for me. And my office at home has piles of things all over the place, and I don't really set a good example. So underneath my anger was the fear that I was a bad mom. So I got to the vulnerable emotion, and I went back to her and I shared the vulnerable emotion instead of the anger. And I said, Macy, I need to apologize. That anger last night about your messy room was not about your messy room. It was about me being afraid that I'm not a good mom and I'm not teaching you how to keep your room clean. And I said, will you forgive me? And she started tearing up and she said, yes. And you know what she went and did? It's almost too good to be true. She went and cleaned her room. The vulnerable emotion made a connection between us that then motivated her to actually do what I was asking. The anger didn't. So that's just an example of identifying the emotions underneath the surface. So what is the difference between a want and a need? We've talked about thoughts. We're good at coming up with our thoughts. Feelings are a little bit harder, so we spent some time on that. But what's the difference between a want and a need? And there's really no hard line answer for this. You can think about basic needs, so shelter, clothing, food, water, place to live, all that good stuff. And a want is something that life would be better if I had it, but I don't necessarily need it. So there's not a clear line between those. And it also depends on your resources. If you don't know what you want and need, ask yourself what brought you pure joy as a child. A lot of women come to my office when they're in transitions and they don't know what the next step is. And I ask them this question: what brought you pure joy as a child? I want you to type one thing that brought you pure joy as a child into the chat. It can be simple. It can be blowing bubbles, climbing trees, playing the violin, playing with my siblings. I want you to type that in the chat. What brought you pure joy as a child? And that can help you know what you want and need in your life. Okay, number 3. So we first talked about self-reflection, knowing your past patterns, self-awareness, knowing now how you think, feel, want, and need. And number 3 is self-soothing. So that's calming yourself down. So if you have an anxious attachment style, you tend to need skills to calm yourself down. And if you are more avoidant, you tend to need mindfulness and the ability to tap into your emotions. So they're both ways of managing emotions and skills that you need. And then if you're securely attached, you need those skills anyway just to be emotionally healthy. In order to effectively assert yourself, you have to have mastery of your emotions, because emotions are communicated through nonverbal language. So you may say something, but your emotions and your nonverbal will or can sabotage what you're saying. So like I said, the anxious attachment style is to calm down emotions and experience yourself as separate, so that differentiation. And avoidant style is to connect to and actually experience emotions and experience yourself as more connected to other people. So mindfulness is a great practice for all attachment styles, and it means paying attention on purpose in the present moment without judgment. Paying attention on purpose in the present moment without judgment. So let's together do just kind of a mindfulness exercise. It's really easy. It's called box breathing. And you breathe in for 4 seconds. Hold for 4 seconds. Breathe out for 4 seconds. and hold for 4 seconds. Okay, so you can do that over and over again. If you're feeling flooded and anxious, and when you need to have an important conversation, focus on your breath, and you can use this box breathing. You can also use this box breathing to tune in to what's happening inside you and what your emotions are. A word about self-compassion. Self-compassion and developing it is really important in learning how to communicate assertively. Assertively. Yeah, that's right. We tend to focus on self-esteem, how we feel about ourselves, but self-compassion is how we treat ourselves when we're suffering, when we're having difficult emotions. So self-compassion, we always have control over. Self-esteem, the evaluation of ourselves based on comparison, we don't have control over where we rank in that. So self-compassion wins. And I've already gone over this. Self-esteem is cognitive. Self-compassion is based on action and how you respond. There are 3 components to self-compassion according to researcher Kristin Neff, and they are common suffering, mindfulness, and self-kindness. Common suffering is the one that people go, what's that? Common suffering is the understanding and recognition that everybody suffers, that is what every human being has in common. We all have suffered. So when we are emotionally in pain or when we're shut down, we tend to isolate and not go toward our relationships. And so keeping common suffering in mind makes us feel less alone. It's like, oh, we're in good company. This is everybody. And then mindfulness we talked about and did a little exercise, but that's just being aware of what's going on without judgment. And then self-kindness is how you treat yourself. And it's treating yourself as you would treat a really good friend or family member who is suffering. Treating yourself when you're having difficult emotions. So that's self-compassion, and that's another skill for self-soothing. My slides are not moving forward. Another tool for self-soothing is practicing shame resilience. Shame triggers tend to be threats to your ideal identity, how you want to view yourself and how you want to be viewed by others, and how do you not want to be viewed. So I don't want to be thought of as a neglectful mom because I work, or I want to see myself as an athlete, or I don't want to see myself as lazy. So how you view yourself and how you want others to view you is a big shame trigger. 4 steps to developing shame resilience is recognize when we feel shame and understand the triggers. Develop critical awareness or normalize shame and know that everybody experiences shame. And that's kind of like Kristin Neff's common humanity. Reach out for support and tell and share stories of shame and share them with someone who will empathize, because empathy is the antidote to shame. And these are 4 steps developed by Dr. Brené Brown. All right, number 4, self-expression. Self-expression, that's actually what you say. So now we're to assertiveness, like what do you actually say? And assertiveness brings connection. I talked earlier that our number 1 fear is that it will bring disconnection, but it actually brings connection. One of the hardest things for women, especially women who are juggling many parts of life, is to say no. So do you have difficulty saying no? Honestly. Here are some of my favorite phrases for saying no. You can just say no. Can you take on this new project? No. Can you watch my kids for 3 hours this afternoon? No. It's a complete sentence, but if you can't do that, then you want to have some other things to say. So that's just not going to work for me. I can't give you an answer right now. Will you check back with me later? I want to, but I'm unable to. I'm not able to commit to that right now. I appreciate you asking me, but I can't. No, I can't do that, but here's what I can do. So those, you can read through the ones that I didn't read. Those are some of my favorite phrases for saying no. And they can, if you have a few that are just ready, like that's just not going to work for me, that's my go-to one. So no is a fundamental boundary. It's one of the first words that little kids say, and it's one of the most common words that teenagers say when they're trying to separate from you. So reclaim your right to say no. Here's another tool for communication that I love. I learned as an undergrad and I still use it today. I feel blank. That's your feeling. When you blank. That's the other person's specific behavior. Because I think blank. So I want you to think about that. I feel sad when you come home and turn on sports because I think I'm not important to you. And that's not an actual scenario that's ever happened in my house. So that is a really great sentence structure for assertive communication. I feel when you, because I think blank. And then making a request, my favorite phrase is, it would mean a lot to me if blank. It would mean a lot to me if you would take over this project. It would mean a lot to me if you would pick up your toys. My kids use this on me a lot and it works. They're like, it would mean a lot to me if you could take me to the mall, or it would mean a lot to me. So it's actually just a really nice way of making a request, and people tend to respond when you ask without demanding. So there's another good tool for assertive communication. When you are being assertive, you want to use more than words. So your body language needs to be congruent. Body language actually trumps words. So you could be saying something, but if you're like, yeah, I'm having a really good day. I'm slumped over. I'm kind of looking down. It doesn't match. So when you're communicating, if you want to be perceived as communicating strongly, stand up with your shoulders back, maintain eye contact, speak in a clear, steady voice, speak without hesitation. That helps get your message across. So how you present yourself, upright, direct, open, your arms and hands open, so not folded and closed. So those are some tips for effective communication. Here are some things that will increase the likelihood that you'll actually be heard when you assert yourself. So asking permission, if it's an intense topic, saying, is now a good time to talk about the disaster we had last week at work? Or is now a good time to talk about our relationship? So asking, or when would be a good time? So that really helps. The timing is important. Keep it private. Difficult conversations in front of other people trigger shame and tend to escalate. So keep it private if you have to have a difficult conversation, and be assertive about something that might be tender. And then put down your crystal ball. What I mean by that is don't assume you know how the other person is going to respond. Be open to any response. Be prepared for multiple responses, but be open to any of them. Don't just assume it's going to be this. Assertiveness often requires action, so it's more than words. Assertiveness might mean walking out of a meeting. It might mean hanging up the phone. It might mean quitting a job where there's a toxic boss. It might mean breaking up and then blocking your ex's number so you aren't tempted to speak with him or her. So it requires action, standing in front of someone. If you see someone being unkind to another person, blocking, kind of getting in front and saying, hey, stop that. So be prepared to take action when you are being prepared to assert yourself. Assertiveness in action. Observe the situation. So this is kind of an OSCAR is the acronym. Observe the situation, sort your thoughts and feelings, compassionately communicate, ask questions, and request directly. OSCAR. So that's a way that you can, in the moment, decide what you need to request. So there are 3 stances: doormat, sword, and lantern when we communicate. The doormat stance is, I think we all know, it's when people can run over you. You don't want to disappoint others. It's passive. The payoff is not taking responsibility. You might be too overwhelmed by emotions or too disconnected from your emotions. That's the doormat stance when you communicate. The sword stance is, if you have a sword, it's temporarily powerful. It's protective. You protect your primary vulnerable emotions. And sometimes you have to do that if someone's attacking you, verbally or physically. But the sword pushes people away. And people use this when they're overwhelmed with, I don't know what I think or feel, or when they're not aware and accessing vulnerable emotions. And the lantern stance is the assertive approach to communication. And I envision myself standing feet shoulder width apart, holding up a lantern and illuminating the larger area. Emotional awareness, and you're able to distinguish your thoughts from your feelings. I feel this, I think this. You can hold space for others' differences, and you have a soft start. So, hey, I've been feeling, or hey, can we have this conversation? Or, I'm something that's soft. It's not coming right at them like the sword. And then use empathy and integrate all of the skills of assertiveness. So we've already talked about 4. Now we'll talk about the last one, self-expansion. And what that is being willing to be changed by your relationships and your communication with other people. Holding space for another person's point of view. That is compassion, right? Developing compassion. And so being willing to be expanded beyond your own point of view. We grow in and through relationships. So part of this compassion and taking another person's point of view is empathy. And there are 4 parts to empathy: seeing the world as another person sees it, being non-judgmental, understanding their feelings, and communicating your understanding of that person's feelings. That's a big part. You might empathize inside, but the ability to communicate that is a part of empathy. When you are standing firmly with your feet squarely apart, holding up the lantern, you not only see the situation at hand more clearly, but the lantern's light allows you to be more aware of others' suffering and how you might help. So that's how self-expansion grows compassion. This is self-expansion, an awareness of others' experiences, a willingness to feel with them, to be changed by them, to be moved by them, in a way that inspires you to do something to ease their pain. So just to review, we talked about self-reflection brings clarity, self-awareness brings confidence, self-soothing brings calmness, self-expression brings connection, and self-expansion brings compassion. Here's another quote from the book about holding up the lantern. While holding the lantern, you are able to express difference, make requests, balance your feelings, thoughts, needs, and wants with the perspective of others. You now have more tools to express yourself, including what makes you different, which ironically brings you closer to others and to be known. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Here are some ways to contact me, drjuliehanks.com. And I'm very active on social media, particularly Instagram. So at Dr. Julie Hanks, please connect with me there. And I appreciate your time today. Thanks so much.